a wonderful turnout, and thank you to Temple Beth El and to everybody who helped put this together, my family, for all the support and making this happen. So I just like to open with a few notes because I like to be honest and transparent. First of all, we'll get into about my background and what I've learned that's brought me to this point. But I just want to be upfront that my background academically is not as a historian. This is something that I'm beginning to explore myself. It's something that I'm just starting to learn. There are things that I'm still finding out. There's a lot of information that I still don't know. But these stories, I think, as I've learned them thus far, I'm really excited to share with you. The other note of transparency is that this is not a sales pitch, but I do run a company that takes people on tours to go to Azerbaijan and explore these stories. So if some of this intrigues you, you're welcome to talk with me about that afterward. But really what I hope comes across is that I'm organizing these tours because I'm really passionate about sharing these stories. I think that it's great that we share, as it was introduced, we have these Ashkenazi, European backgrounds, and we often don't get to learn about Middle Eastern backgrounds, and especially not Jews from the Caucasus region. And so I want to share these stories because it tells a little bit of a different experience than what we may think of as our diasporic experience as Jewish people. So we'll want to keep this building in mind as we start our journey tonight. This is a journey that explores both how I got to this project in the first place and the explorations that have occurred since first going to Azerbaijan. So this picture was taken on my first trip up to the Jewish village of Girmez-Kesebe, or Krasnaya Sloboda, which means red-roofed village, in northern Azerbaijan, and that is their main synagogue. So we'll get there. Now this first picture, this presentation... So this presentation was created. I've done this, shared these stories now in 2 different countries, 3 different locations. So when this is the point where normally the audience is, "Wow, that's so incredible."
But we get it.
Yeah. But what this is also to share about is those of you who know my father know his affinity for outdoor adventuring, which he passed down onto me, and this also brought us to knowledge about the mountain Jews. We had heard about this Jewish community in the Caucasus Mountains called the Mountain Jews, and we're always intrigued by this, because we are Jewish and grew up here, and so I'm loosely affiliated as a mountain Jew in my youth. You can see. Yeah.
All right.
So I was always really intrigued by this group of people. And I went to Prescott College in Arizona, where I did my undergraduate in environmental studies with emphasis in anthropology. And the learning experiences there were all experiential, field-based. So this is where the process of going in depth and exploring something by experiencing it firsthand really became a part of my passion and my worldview. And also through going to Prescott College, I continued that love of the outdoors and outdoor pursuits, which I continued also to this day even. I've climbed Shasta 5 times. That was after soloing a north side route on Mount Shasta. And after graduating Prescott College, I came back here and I worked for a Native American tribe, the Yurok tribe. And it was through the Watershed Stewards program with AmeriCorps. And that was really something that cemented for me something that I had experienced in 2005, where I dropped out of college and I bought a plane ticket to Israel, and I didn't know where I was going to sleep or where I was going to eat. And I went on this spiritual pilgrimage, and I really connected to this idea of having a sense of indigenous heritage, that my spiritual worldview was connected very much to this beautiful land. And that was a jealousy that I had growing up here in Northern California of the Native American culture. And it's something that I found that I had very much in being in Israel. So after some time of trying to, I worked for the Yurok tribe doing water quality data collection and trying to find my way through 2009 economic crisis. I eventually went to Paris, where I did a master's degree in cross-cultural and sustainable business management, and then moved in 2012 to Israel, where I live today. And I currently live in Jaffa, but I've lived in all sorts of different places around Israel, and I still really love that connection to the land and the heritage that's connected to the land. So this is in northern Israel near Tzfat, Safed, in the Galil region, hiking in a place called Nahal Amud. It's been quite a process for me to find stable employment and find my footing in Israel. It's not an easy place to make it. But after 4 months of calling them virtually every day at Tel Aviv University, when I found out that they had a job opening at their environmental school, I finally, after dogged pursuit, was given this position. I was administrative staff in the environmental school, and one of my favorite parts of my job was organizing a cross-border environmental study tour. This tour goes for 1 week in Jordan and 1 week in Israel, exploring environmental management as well as management with the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian territories. And as you can see, this is a joint project with Columbia University. And as you can see, we have this incredible diverse background of students, Arabs and Jews, people from all over the world. And this is where I really came to understand that I enjoy the creation of a meaningful travel experience for people. And to see the impact that this tour had on people's lives really was inspirational for me. Also at Tel Aviv University, I got connected to a Muslim-Jewish tech study group. Students who wanted to learn about the similarities and differences in our tradition between Islam and Judaism. So we would look at things like Jummah, the day of rest in Islam, and Shabbat, and what are the similarities and differences. And through this group, we got an invitation through an Erasmus Plus program to go to Azerbaijan to attend the Islamic Solidarity Games, which is kind of like, if you can imagine, the Olympic Games for the Islamic world, to be an Arab-Jewish delegation to see how sports can be a bridge-building tool. So that was last summer, not the summer most recent, but the summer prior. So there we got to sit with the Iraqi national handball team watching Saudi Arabia defeat Turkey in a handball match. Wow. And it was really an incredible experience because we were in this Muslim majority country, and my friend who was there, he wears his yarmulke very openly, his kippah, wherever he goes. So he went up to these guys and he put his arms between them and he says, "Hey guys, can I take a selfie with you?" And he's standing there with his yarmulke. And I think the reality is that these guys, they grew up in Iraq and they've probably never seen a Jew at this point because of the disappearance of the heritage in their country. So, but it was this interesting experience to be so free and to be able to be so open there in the Islamic Solidarity Games in this Muslim majority country. And we decided to go around and explore the city a bit. So we have the capital city of Azerbaijan, which is Baku. And Baku is located here. This is a map of Azerbaijan. Here you have Iran, is on the southern border. You have Armenia coming down here. You have Georgia here, and you have Russia coming across the top, and this is the Caspian Sea. Wow. And on this peninsula, called the Absheron Peninsula, you have the capital city of Baku, or Baku. And Baku is about 2 million people. It was basically not much of a town of note until the 13th century, when there's a huge earthquake in Iran, and it destroys the administrative centers at the time, and they decide to move the courts to Baku. And this is where it starts to become an important administrative center. But the town really, really takes off at the late 1800s when oil becomes important. And by the time you have the early 20th century, Azerbaijan is producing 80% of the world's oil. This is why the Nazi armies were bogged down in Stalingrad. They were trying to sweep across the Russian plains, go across the top of the Caucasus Mountains, and sweep down along the Caspian coast and capture the oil fields primarily of Azerbaijan. So you have this old city with these old city walls, and then you have this contrast with the flame towers, the modern architecture of the city. These towers actually project holographic flames at night.
Whoa. Cool. Wow.
How much electricity does that take?
I don't know, but they have clearly plenty of resources for making their electricity. So, yeah, things are very, very cheap in Baku. There's a beautiful metro system, and it costs 60 cents to ride the metro. This might be a point of interest, it's very American of me, but this building here was actually at one point the world's largest Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Whoa. Pretty fancy.
And here we have the downtown touristic area, and all of the people milling about here are all tourists from the Gulf states. You hardly see any tourists from European countries or the United States. Lots of people vacationing from Kuwait, from Qatar, from Iraq even. So again, it's a really incredible experience as somebody who lives in Israel, where things are maybe more divided sometimes. Definitely not a lot of opportunity to interact with people from Iraq. So this was my friend Nur al-Huda. She was a part of our tech study group. And we got 4 people, Nur al-Huda, Ezra, Sarah, and me. And I said to them, hey, I did a little bit of research, and I found out that there's a remaining Jewish village far up in the north of Azerbaijan, and maybe we can get a car and go there. So we went up north, along the Caspian coast, and to this city called Guba. Guba is the name of a rayon that will come into importance later on. Rayon means an administrative district for Azerbaijan, but at the time where we'll be interested, it was actually its own little kingdom of Guba. So we got to Givnazakesebe, and we see Stars of David, and we're walking around, but we don't know anybody, and we don't know what's there. We try to speak to some people. Nobody really speaks any English. Our driver, Vakif, doesn't really speak English so well, but he's trying to help us. And then suddenly this woman peeks her head out the door as a tss, and gestures for us to come in. And her name was Hiba. I don't know how old she was, but she invited us in for candy, cherries, and tea. And that was our first experience of just meeting somebody from the village. And it was in very much the style. Azerbaijan is a very big tea country, and that's an essential part of the country's culture, is that if you meet somebody, you invite them into your home, and you sit down and you have tea with them. And also, there's no such thing as traveling for more than an hour and a half without stopping at a tea house and having a tea.
That's awesome.
And finally, we met this guy, Yeshayahu. Finally, somebody who speaks in Hebrew, somebody who speaks in Ivrit. And he helps us find Rabbi Yonah. And Rabbi Yonah is a Chabad rabbi who's been living there for 12 years. He's from a city in Israel called Kiryat Gat, which is known for its Jews of Middle Eastern descent. He himself is of Middle Eastern descent, but has chosen to follow the Hasidic path. And he lives in this village. He speaks the different languages. Now, this is what we found out about this village when we got there, is that they speak their own language called Juhuri, which is a Judeo-Persian language.
Whoa.
Which is, you could think of it as like a Persian Yiddish, if you will.
Wow.
Which
In-
one is the red one?
He's not in this picture, yeah. In addition to this, everybody speaks Azerbaijani, which is a Turkic language, Russian, because of the conquest of the Soviet Union, and also people throughout the country speak unique ethnic languages, which we'll get to in a second. But for those who may be studying in Hebrew here, you'll notice, so I got this map there at the bookstore, and it says, Academia Kitab Merkazi. So, academia, okay, we all know that. But kitab, katuv, writing, kitab, literature.
Oh, wow.
Merkazi, merkaz, center. It's the same as we have in Hebrew. All these roots come from Arabic, even though it's a Turkic language.
Wow.
So, for example, the word in Hebrew for date is in time and date, tarikh, and the word for history in Azerbaijani is tarihi.
Wow.
So Rabbi Yonah was generous enough to let us into the winter synagogue. They have 2 synagogues that are active at different times of the year. In the summertime, they have people who come back, who most of them have moved away to Moscow and have made their fortunes there. And so the summertime, the village swells with visitors for the summer, and in the wintertime, the population diminishes. Historically, we learned Kirgizistan had a population of 18,000 people at its height, all Jewish people. We're talking the early 20th century. They had 16 active synagogues. Today there are 2. And what you'll notice, obviously, is this beautiful carpentry, which is relating to Azerbaijan's proximity to Persia and that relationship culturally. So if you allow me, we'll go on a brief digression about carpets. So we went on our most recent trip that I guided to a carpet workshop, where what they're doing is they've actually worked with archaeologists to revive patterns of tapestry that haven't been recreated in hundreds of years, to be able to weave these new patterns. And it was an absolutely mind-blowing place. You can get a pretty decent-sized carpet for probably, a carpet that would run about $3,000 in a shop here. You can get it on the place for $700. This carpet is not for sale because it took 12 years by hand to make this carpet.
So what are they going to use it for?
It's art. It's the art of the person and the love of the creation of that art. There's also a national carpet museum in Azerbaijan. And the building itself, you can see this rounded shape. I don't have a picture from the outside, but it's actually designed as a giant rolled up carpet.
Oh my God.
And then this carpet is a huge carpet, depicts the story of Eliezer, the biblical story of Eliezer being sent to look for a wife for Isaac and meeting Rebekah and being poured water by Rebekah. Now, what's interesting in Azerbaijan, I don't want to create an overly positive view of the country. I like to tout the things that I really appreciate about it. The reality is that it's a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship ruled by a single family, the Aliyev family. And there's no freedom of press and there's no freedom of speech there. However, in the National Carpet Museum, we saw these modern art carpets with these interesting themes, such as this one called Resist, as well as this very powerful one that's not oil dripped on it, that's woven in this way,
Oh my gosh.
of the oil of the country, overwhelming the cultural symbol of the country. And then this carpet in the back is probably, as big as this whole entire back space. It's gigantic. So after this first trip with my friends to go to Gürmezekesebe, I stood there in this Jewish village, 2,000 people, looking at 14,000-foot peaks towering above the village, and I said, this is obviously a dream come true for a mountain Jewish boy from Humboldt County. So I had just come off of my first successful cross-border environmental study tour, and I immediately bought a ticket to go to Azerbaijan to see what would it take for me to put together a travel experience there. And it took about a month of research while I was prepping for this, because I knew I wanted to do it, to find these guys who run the only trekking company in the entire country. And they're these wonderful young guys. And so I had this great guy named Elvin. And Elvin took me up into the mountains. And we went on the craziest four-wheel drive road I've ever been on in my life, including crossing this bridge where the driver told us we had to get out of the car, take our backpacks, and only the car and the driver could go across this bridge.
Whoa.
There was this uncertainty about whether it could withstand our weight.
Oh my goodness.
And when I got to Giriz, this village, I was very intrigued. The host was very excited to meet me, but he didn't really go into too much detail. He just said, we used to live with Jewish people. Jewish people used to live up here. Wow, okay, interesting. And we trekked for 2 days in the mountains and eventually reached this village called Khinalu. Khinalik is its own ethnic group with its own ethnic language that's dating back from the time of what's called the Caucasian Albanian Kingdom. Now we have a couple words in there that maybe we need to unpack. First of all, this word Albanian. So we're out in the middle of the Caucasus Mountains, super far away from Eastern Europe. The Pontic Greeks and the Romans, this was actually, Azerbaijan was the farthest western extent, or eastern extent of the Roman Empire. And the Greeks, when they encountered this ancient kingdom, they didn't know what they called themselves, and they called them Albanians, and they called the Georgian kingdoms, they called it Iberia. Go figure. One of the things when I say I'm still discovering, I'm very intrigued to understand what the connection and why. I'm assuming Albania has something to do with white and the whiteness of the Caucasus Mountains. Now that brings us to the other point. We were talking about whiteness and Caucasians and all this. Where does this word Caucasian even come from? So there was this German naturalist, 17th century, and he was really obsessed with phrenology, and he was really interested in the physical development of people and their forms, and he thought that you could divide races by this. And so he encountered the skulls that were excavated in Georgia, and he said, those are the most perfect skulls. Europeans must have been descended from Caucasians, from the people of the Caucasus Mountains. And this is where that label comes from.
Why do you say Caucasus? I thought it was Caucasian.
So Caucasian, the term, comes from the word Caucasus, which is the name of the mountain range.
I've never seen that written on a map. It says Caucasus.
Caucasus Mountains.
It says Caucasus.
Okay, well,
He's just
apple.
saying it
Yeah,
differently.
yeah,
I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, I know, he's just pronouncing it.
yeah. I think it's a tomato. So they've lived there for 3,500 years.
Wow.
They're lumped in this group of languages that were spoken at the time of the Caucasian Albanian Kingdom, which starts in the year 1200 before Common Era. They wind up actually surviving into the time of the Armenian Kingdom, which was the first kingdom in the world to convert to Christianity. And the people here, though, they've been through all sorts of different religious shifts: Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and now Islam. One of the other things that's really great about being there is, as I was saying, the ability to meet people that I otherwise wouldn't meet. So in my hostel, after coming down out of the mountains, I befriended this incredible guy. So we have this guy on the left, the far left. He's an Iranian guy who has retired, and he bought a bicycle, and he's fleeing Iran and everything he knows to go ride his bicycle and get away from it all. This was a young couple, also from Iran, and this is the uncle and nephew. He's from Tikrit, Iraq, and he's from Mosul, Iraq. His name is Muhammad. And Muhammad and I wound up spending all night just talking. He's 20 years old now. His entire life has been warfare. And I was so moved and intrigued to ask him about his faith as a Muslim person, given the hardships that he's seen. And he said to me at one point, I don't blame or believe that it's God who did any of the things that I experienced. I believe that it's God who gave me the strength to persevere in the face of the things that I experienced. And at one point I was so moved by what he had to say, I broke into tears. And he said to me, Arieh, first and foremost, you're a human being, but to see you as an Israeli, American, Jewish person, empathize for my story, it really means a lot to me. He and I, we text each other at least once a month and talk to each other. We're still in touch. I consider him one of my best friends there now. And he's in dentistry school. A little other story about him, because I think his stories are just incredible. And this is a night of stories. So he was going on the airplane to go visit his brother in Turkey. When he got on the airplane, his airplane was the last one to make it out of Mosul International Airport before ISIS came and conquered his city. Thankfully, his entire family is okay. His father's a surgeon. They were able to get themselves out. His family home even managed to survive and has not been destroyed. He went back about a year ago to see everything and to finish his high school degree, actually, before going on to dentistry school. So finally, this last August, I was able to organize a group of people to run my first pilot project, exploration, guiding people, encountering these stories. I had an incredible group of people, really brilliant, this wonderful family, a journalist who what he does is he creates Arabic language programming because he speaks Arabic fluently on YouTube for the Arab world to learn about Judaism, and then interacts and chats with them online and discusses.
Wow.
He's a military correspondent. He is a former Judeo studies professor from Lafayette University. And I couldn't have asked for a better group. And remember I said, remember that first synagogue? That's inside the main synagogue in Gimel-Zekesed. When I was in one of the synagogues, I was hunting around and I found this incredible map of the story of Jewish people. The story of the Jewish people and how they got to Azerbaijan is not entirely clear. It's a bit of a mystery. You can hear different stories from different people, that they were in Babylon and they were enslaved and were brought there, that they were fleeing violence and persecution in Persia at the time. The exact reason why the Jewish people decided to leave is not entirely clear. It seems that from this map, however, written in Cyrillic, so I'm still working on learning that, but we have Jerusalem here, and then we have going into Mesopotamia around the time of after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem, and then continuing up until we have, in the Common Era, year 400, the Jews arriving into the Caucasus Mountains. The idea that they came from Persia, again, makes sense given the fact that they speak this Judeo-Persian dialect. It's such an ancient dialect that Persian speakers can't really understand what's being said. And the Jewish people placed themselves up in these far mountains as vital key points, gatekeepers in the trade routes between the Caucasus Mountains. So here we come to the story of Gimel-Zekesed and Quba, and the Khanate of Quba, and Fatali Khan. Now, that is not a picture of Fatali Khan. I was not able to find a picture of Fatali Khan anywhere. That is a picture of Fatali Shah, who was a contemporary leader of Persia at the time that Azerbaijan breaks up into these Khanates about 350 years ago. So the Jewish people are being persecuted in different places throughout the Caucasus Mountains, and Fatali Khan knows about their business acumen and prowess and importance in the region and says, come here and build a village in my kingdom. Muslim ruler giving the Jewish people safe haven. And that's where you have the Jewish village of Gimel-Zekesed that has been built 350 years ago. It's been under many different occupations and different rulerships. At one point, Azerbaijan tried to become an independent republic and tried to establish, right after the fall of the Russian Empire, a secular, democratic, Islamic republic, intended to be the first in the world. Unfortunately, the Bolsheviks, 2 years later after its establishment, come in and conquer Azerbaijan, and everybody in the region lives under Soviet rule. So here we have from the Olympic Games in Russia, or in the USSR, commemoration there in the Jewish village.
Wow.
And they really, it's amazing that the local dialect survived, because not much else did. The 18 synagogues of the village got converted to administrative buildings. Here we have one that got it converted into an administrative building, beautiful architecture, and they decided after Soviet rule to remove this. And it was written in Hebrew script, and that's how they knew that it was a synagogue. We were invited to have meals with the community. What I understand is that we were actually the first organized group to have Shabbat with this Jewish community. This Jewish community is not needing tourist dollars. They have people who have grown up there, moved to Moscow, and have become multimillionaires, billionaires, including a famous man named Gad Nasimov, who's an oligarch and very close to Putin. So these people bankroll the community there. There's nobody living in abject poverty. But you do see these interesting contrasts of old Russian station wagons and shiny Mercedes going down the street. And they have done an incredible job of restoring the buildings. So this is where the students and the young people in the village take their classes. And this is also where we ate our meals. we were guided around the village by a rabbi named Rabbi Tzadok. And Rabbi Tzadok grew up here, in this region called the Dagestan. That's on the north side of Caucasus Mountains. He moved to Israel as a young man, but he's really, really passionate about engaging in the cultural heritage of this region. So he's moved there. He spends 2 weeks in Azerbaijan, 2 weeks in Israel. Back and forth, because there's a direct flight, 3.5 hours from Israel. How come? Israel buys 60% of its oil from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan hires a lot of ministers and people working in technology from Israel, as well as purchases a lot of its weaponry for its armed conflict with Armenia from Israel.
Why do they have a conflict with Armenia?
That's a very long historical expose that I think that I'll not go down, but it has to do with long-standing disputes from, we're talking the year 1200 before Common Era, about where Armenia was and where Azerbaijan was and where these kingdoms were, and then these disputes have been filtered through the various powers that have conquered them and divided them, and that feud has never been resolved as a result of the borders that were established by the Soviet Union. And disputes over whose territory was what. Yeah. So we continue on up to Hinalik village after having Shabbat with the community. And what was interesting in the community, again, is that they don't have their own traditions. There was a small pronunciation difference, but other than that, it was just like being in Israel. Although the weather outside was a little different. Thunderclouds, and it was cool, and it was August, which was a nice relief from Tel Aviv. And then we went further up into the mountains where it was much colder. I had this local guide who works for Camping Azerbaijan, Tural, who helped guide us for 3 days in the mountains. And that's another view of Hinalik. Now, the word tel, like Tel Aviv, has a modern meaning, has an ancient meaning that just means hill, but has a modern meaning that means the accumulation of archaeological ruins that create an artificial hill. So whenever you drive around Israel, you can go to these different places and you can see these mounds with little ruins on them and stuff, and it's really incredible. And what was really mind-blowing for me, coming from Israel, is that Hinalik is in some ways a living tent. There's the accumulation of ruins of 3,500 years, and yet people still are building on top of that and building on top of that. The way that they survive up here, by the way, is shepherding. And the way that they survive the winter is by burning cow chicks. As you can see, there are no trees. The ecology of this region is very strange for somebody coming from this region. There are no coniferous trees. Everything there is deciduous. So suddenly, the tree line just stops, and it stops at like 4,000 feet above sea level. It's a very strange experience, and then all of a sudden it's just grassland until you get to the really high mountains where it's barren and there's snow. So you can see that broad open landscape. And we went and hiked and had lunch at another village called Galakuda, which is an Azeri village in the mountains. So there's Elchanan. It was his birthday. He was really happy. This is one of my favorite pictures from the trek that day between Hinalik and Geriz. That's called Hinalik Peak. It's a 13,000-foot peak. And then we make it to Geriz village, which we already mentioned. And there I came to understand what he meant by, we used to live with Jewish people. So again, this is another ethnic group that speaks their own ethnic language. It's not related to any other language that we know in the world. It's just lumped in under this sort of general category of languages that existed under this ancient kingdom. And we go there, and we're hosted by this man named Sheikh Baba. And Sheikh Baba tells us that in the year 300, the Jewish people came to the Geriz people seeking safe haven, and from the year 300 to the year 700, the Jewish people and the Geriz people lived together, high in the mountains. And he told me that even today, when the Geriz people come down out of the mountains, and they come to Quba, they don't stay on the Muslim side of the river. They cross the river over to the Jewish village, and they stay with the Jewish people, because the Jewish people remember this time when they were given safe haven. So I'm pretty flexible when I travel about my kosher. I tell people I'm vegetarian, and that works for me. And because my friend Elvin, who runs the trekking company, is also vegetarian, he's able to arrange that very well. So we get this local amazing food with mountain herbs and salt and, you know, fresh baked bread and eggs. That's butter. Fresh churned. Literally still oozing the milk out.
How come it's yellow? What are the cows eating?
I don't know. It's a good question. That's the color.
Probably not artificially added.
Definitely not. Yeah. So there we have our host Chef Baba explaining to us about the Gurdiz language. The Gurdiz language is probably not going to be around for more than another 30 years. The young people don't learn it. They don't teach it in school because the country is seeking to have unity, and that diversity in the mind of the government there doesn't help that unity. This is a mosque that's destroyed or abandoned from the 13th century. It's on top of the mountains. Incredible. So when I got up in the morning and I wanted to put on my tefillin and do morning prayers, that's where I went in the morning. The third and last place that we went was a village of an entirely other ethnic group called the Lesgi people. And they come from that northern region of the Caucasus in Russia called Dagestan. Dagestan is this incredible place. There's still mountain Jews living there. There's the Lesgi people who come from there. In Syria and in Israel, there's a group of people, an ancient people called the Circassians, who hail originally from Dagestan. I'm very curious to know what it was about Dagestan that became this sort of center for cultural diversity and expression, because it's really, there are so many ethnic groups that come from there. And that's a view of the Golden Rocks. It's the 5th highest mountain in Azerbaijan. And after the tour finished, it was really, I couldn't have asked for a more successful and greater time. Everybody came back safe. The majority of people enjoyed themselves. And I didn't lose money. So it was really, and I learned a lot from my experience with them.
Anyone get sick?
So one person had some altitude issues. Yeah. Another guy didn't tell me that he has a severe fear of heights, which I only discovered halfway up a staircase. So his trekking experience was cut short by that. And I also had a client who may have had some developmental differences that I didn't recognize until early on, and the relationship was a little strained because I didn't put some certain boundaries, but everything worked out well. Yeah, it was really good. So we went back into Baku. I found the only vegan restaurant in the entire city. We had our final dinner there. Said goodbye to the group, and I wanted to explore more, because that's what I like to do. And I heard from some people that in a village called Oghuz, there was a community of Jewish people there. It was active, and I could find people there. So I sort of packed my bag on a Friday, took a 4-hour bus ride out along this highway. Here's the Caucasus Mountains, and I go to this little town called Oghuz. And I get there, and by then I've learned a little bit of Azerbaijan, but I'm not really getting anywhere by asking Yehudi Harabadir, and people are saying, huh? Huh? And so finally I break down and I say, Synagogue Harabadir, which means, where's the synagogue? And I say, oh, and they throw me in a car and they drive me down to the synagogue. I eventually learned that it's not Yehudi, that's how you say Jew, it's Yahude. So I was clearly butchering the pronunciation. But it's a village of 7,000 people, with 55 Jews left there. They don't speak Hebrew, they don't know how to pray. They hire a rabbi to come in on Yom Kippur. And yet, there are 2 synagogues there. So here you have the Uptown Synagogue. All of these synagogues are being restored as well. It's really incredible, and it's really beautiful. So I found myself praying Kabbalat Shabbat, praying evening prayers there by myself, as a cow plodded out the window. And I was like, okay, this is really the authentic shtetl experience. And then in the morning I went, and I'm praying morning prayers. And it's about 10:15 in the morning. And this guy comes in, reeking of alcohol. And he sees me praying, and he just starts breaking down. He breaks down into tears, sits down next to me, puts his hand on my knee, and he just sat there with me for half an hour as I prayed morning prayers. And then a Jewish Israeli group comes in, and they take some photos, and they ask some questions, and then all pile back on the bus and leave. But what was interesting to note is because Azerbaijan is this 93% Muslim majority country with this Jewish history there, this Israeli tour group is a third Arab and 2/3 Jewish, traveling together in this tour group exploring the country. So there's the downtown synagogue, the older synagogue, created in 1847. And I had a bit of a time trying to find this one. I went to the local mosque, knocked on the door, figured, yeah, the imam probably knows where the synagogue is, and he helped me find it. So, again, the shtetl experience probably would be fountain with the cows. Yeah, so this one hasn't really been restored very much. And I wound up going through all these books that were there. It was interesting to see there were these books about Ilm Vidin was on the title, which if you speak Arabic, science and religion. Okay. And there were books about the conflict zone, and a book about every single mosque in the entire country. There were also these other books that were there. And I opened them up, and I see things like this book printed in Warsaw. This book printed in Vilna in the year 1900. Again, stories. How did they get there? Where did this come from?
Was there a Torah there?
Yeah, there's a Torah in the Ark, yeah. And then I open up this Chumash, this Torah, and I notice this folded up piece of paper, and I open it up, posted it online, had no idea. The consensus seems to be that it was an amulet that somebody had left in it, an amulet. So again, I don't know how old this is, I don't know the story of it, but it was just fascinating to just open up the book and there is this piece of paper that somebody had written by hand as some form of spiritual protection for themselves.
Wow.
And in keeping with my love of the mountains, after having Shabbat in Oghuz, I went up into the mountains by myself. When I was in Oghuz, I encountered this young woman. She kept on smiling at me as I passed. I was like, okay, maybe we should say hello. So I say hi to her and I said, excuse me, do you speak English? And she says, yes, I am English teacher. Okay, great. So she invites me to have tea to celebrate the birthday party of 2 of her students in her classroom. And I go down out of the mountains and I have tea. And then she invites me to have tea with her family, and I get there and I'm showing them the pictures from my adventures of the day, and the father looks at this picture and he says, I see that stick. You were really scared of bears, aren't you? The scariest moment that I had in the entire trip was actually when I went off on a little adventure by myself in Giriz to go up into the mountains to try to find some of the ancient ruins of the ancient village. And there I'm going along, and all of a sudden I crest over a rise and I notice these 2 gigantic sheepdogs. The sheepdogs there are nothing like sheepdogs in the Alps. I've encountered sheepdogs around the world. These are these raggedy, ferocious beasts. And there's like a hunk of meat in between them or something, and they're just growling at each other. And I decided probably not the best decision to just run away. I should let them know that I'm here. It's like, hello, hey dogs. So I slowly back away, but their barking called 4 more sheepdogs.
Oh my God.
We're coming down. And I just said to myself, whatever you do, don't run. Just look behind your shoulder, let them know that you know they're there, keep going until finally I got out of range and they didn't pursue me. And I made it back down to breakfast in one piece. So when I saw this big sign going into this wilderness area that there were Eurasian brown bears, I was actually kind of relieved. Because it meant that there weren't going to be any sheepdogs. Aha. So, right, this seems to be better. This has problems. Great, okay. So we're going to do one last thing.
What does Morshet mean?
Moreshet means heritage. I hope that this has speakers. Aha. So we may not be able to do this slide and set up the speakers. Yeah. No. Okay. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to see that, but because we don't have speakers. So this is where the story brings us. It's at now. There's this incredible project called Diarna. What they've done is created an online museum of Jewish heritage based on Google Earth. It's a layer that you can put onto Google Earth, explore all of the Middle East in incredible detail, and read interviews, see 3D renderings, and photographs of this disappearing Middle Eastern Jewish heritage that's being destroyed throughout the Middle East right now due to the current political situation. We're talking about the place where the prophet Jonah and his tomb, or Eliyahu Hanavi, the prophet Elijah, and his synagogue in Syria, in Damascus, totally destroyed. So these are important heritages to preserve, and Diarna has offered to support me to go to Azerbaijan and document Jewish heritage in Azerbaijan for the online museum. So the plan at this point is I'm going to move there, God willing, in the end of March, and the plan is to live there for 7 months, researching for Diarna and guiding groups throughout the summer, and gaining a deep knowledge of the place and becoming proficient in the history and culture of the country. So I'd like to leave this on a small note of contemplation. We're encountering all of this incredible cultural diversity. We're living in a time filled with divisions and people seeking to unify. We're living in a time where people imagine a messianic vision of the ingathering of the Jews. And I'm encountering the Chabad emissary who's there, who he learns the languages, but he doesn't learn anything about the history. And so all he does is when he gives when he's leading the prayers, he leads it in his Ashkenazi style. And yet we encounter Rabbi Tzadok, who comes there, and he comes from this heritage, and he wants to teach this heritage, and yet his ultimate goal is to encourage all of his pupils to move to Israel. And it's really put me in this interesting experience as I explore this. First of all, I don't want to turn these places into a human zoo. I don't want to cheapen the meaning of the realities of these places. And also, it's brought up this interesting question of what does it mean, this tension of the diasporic freedom to explore and express our cultural uniqueness, and yet the desire for us to have unity and to have community together. And these divisions and these tensions. So I don't have answers for you. It's just something that I find myself encountering as I go on these explorations, wondering how we can, on the one hand, I think, promote cultural diversity, which I think is as essential as biodiversity, while at the same time finding a way that we can find unity in all of our various expressions. So, thank you very much. Any questions people have? Yeah, please.
So what's been, I'm a physician, and what's been interesting, and there are many physicians who are Jewish in this county, but what I've noticed over the last 5 years as ancestry, et cetera, have come on, people come up to me and they say, wow, I'm like a third Jewish. Jewish or,
Mhm.
a fifth Jewish. So I'm curious to know, in Israel, are you noting people doing their ancestry and finding that they are part of from this Caucasus Mountains area?
Most people know that they come from from an Azerbaijani background. Actually, it's really interesting. One of the most famous Comanche players. Comanche is like one of these Central Asian lap violins, kind of. Is this guy named Mark Eliyahu, and he comes from Azerbaijani origin, and he's really popular both in Israel and in Azerbaijan. People who come from this heritage know that they do, and it's interesting to encounter that in the Mizrahi, Middle Eastern, Sephardic Jewish world, how much people are really connected. Oh, I'm not just Middle Eastern. I'm Moroccan. I'm Iraqi. I'm Kurdish, and really knowing and being connected to those identities. But again, in the process of the creation of Israel, it was a very Ashkenazi-dominated culture, and that dynamic of how that's all played out, and the attempt to wash over and to Ashkenazify a lot of the Middle Eastern identities is very real. And actually, the synagogue that I go to in Jaffa, its identity and vision is specifically built on healing those rifts and creating a prayer space where people from Yemenite, Moroccan, Iraqi, Breslov, any kind of Ashkenazi background where we can all pray together. Does that get to what you were
Yeah,
trying to get at?
because it's fascinating, because other than some Sephardic Jews, I don't meet that many people who are Jewish.
Yeah.
The entire United States is Ashkenazified.
Yeah. In large part,
So-
yeah.
Yes. So anyway, that's what I was wondering, but like you said, it sounds like they know.
Yeah. Yeah, even after the Soviet conquest, and yet people, 55 Jews, but they know.
Right.
They know that my hotel owner, I show him my passport. Shalom! And please.
So I've traveled through Uzbekistan and the Silk Road in that area. There's certainly a connection to the Caucasus. And I also know some Uzbeks in Boston, Uzbekis in Boston, and they have no desire to return whatsoever. They felt that they experienced over the generations a lot of anti-Semitism, although there were certainly periods of peace and prosperity as well. I'm wondering what you know about the situation of when the Soviets were there, the Jews did pretty well in Bukhara, Samarkand, for example, most of the time, and they basically pretty much shut off Islam, and the Sufis were left, but the Sufis were very underground. So I have a couple of questions. Are there Sufis in the mountain Jewish area? Are you aware of that? And what was there a marked anti-Semitic response at various points to the Jews there? And is that why there are only 55 there now, etc.?
Great, yeah, that's great. So first, to go into a little bit more in depth in the history, Gilmez-Akisabeh, which has existed for 350 years, was established by Fath Ali Khan, and they've lived in peace for the most part since. However, they couldn't guarantee pure and total safety. The Caucasus Mountains are known for its diversity of groups that very much have strong warrior cultures, you could say. And so even today, it's partly cultural in terms of dynamics between genders, but it's also historical. Women stay shuttered indoors. And the reason that we were told this by the various people there was that because if women spent their time outside in the street, a marauding group could just come sweep through the village and kidnap them. That being said, Gilmez-Akisabeh has had a much more positive experience. What I had heard and learned was that in Oghuz, where there are only 55 Jews left, there have been various waves of persecution and anti-Semitism and attacks that have happened by various groups in the region. I don't know about Sufism in Azerbaijan. I know that it's a majority Shiite country with a small Sunni minority.
That's not, then it probably isn't there.
Yeah.
Because the Sufis are Sunni.
Thank you. And as far as people choosing to leave or not, It's a back and forth. People leave because of the economic reality there now. Yes, things are cheap, but a teacher makes $100 a month. It is not an easy life once you get outside of Baku. It's very much a third world or developing country at the lowest level of that. And it's, there's people just standing on the side of the road selling cashews just to try to make a few cents. So a lot of people leave, try to go to Israel. It's not so easy in Israel, they find, and a lot of them return to Baku. So I've encountered a lot of people who they get encouraged to leave, and they leave, but then if they don't have the right network of family and support, it can be very challenging, and it's actually easier for them to stay.
There isn't a group of mountain Jews on Long Island, for example?
Certainly are. Yeah, there are. So what I understand is there are 20,000 Jews left in Azerbaijan. I think that's a high estimate. There are 120,000 mountain Jews living in Israel, and there are about the same number of mountain Jews living in the United States as well. The majority of them on the East Coast. Yeah.
So you just trying to categorize, so they're not actually Mizrahi, are they Azerbaijani? I mean, what?
Yeah, what we say in Hebrew is we call them Kafkazi, which is how you say Caucasus
Okay.
in Hebrew.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got it.
Kafkazi. Yeah.
From that, yeah, okay.
Right.
It describes.
And so some people lump them in with Bukhari, with the Uzbekistani, but
Right.
they like to remain separate. They're,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
we're not Bukhari.
We're not that,
Kafkazi.
right.
Yeah,
I've read some stories about a group called Khazars,
yeah.
and I'm curious if they reached this area because the stories I heard were the Khazars decided to convert to Judaism
Right.
to avoid having to choose between Muslims and Christianity.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating period of time, and I understood that they occupied an area close to where you are.
So this question comes up. It's something that I still haven't found out all the details. Certainly, you're right. The Khazars are more a little bit north, on that sort of northwestern corner of the Caspian Sea. But nonetheless, there must have been, considering the congruence, that there was going on at the same time, there must have been some interaction, but I don't know.
But they were also supposed to be, as I understand, Oriental.
Mm-hmm.
That they were much more like Genghis Khan.
Right.
And that they had, my great aunt had slanted eyes.
Yeah.
And we believe that she had some influence from that region.
Right. So if you, it's kind of hard to see on here, but if you see the Azerbaijani, it's Deniz Khazar. It's the Caspian Sea. It's called the Khazar Sea. So certainly you're in the right region, but I haven't found out anything about the specifics of their relationship to the mountain Jews.
So, during the Soviet era, when religion was pretty much suppressed and the synagogues were closed, how did these people stay Jewish? Did they intermarry? Or did they manage to still keep their ethnicity and their religion? How did that happen?
So I think that in places like Zerubabel, it's its own Jewish village. And they still were able to maintain the rules that they had where they said, we don't rent or sell to anybody who's not Jewish. So they maintained that kind of insularity that I think that allowed them to identify and maintain that continuity. I don't know the extent of what kind of religious practice was carried on in private, but in terms of Oghuz, yeah, I mean, a lot of again, there are no young people there, and I'm not sure whether or not that's because they've all married out or what's the entire story there. But it's all people in an older generation who are stored in Oghuz.
I was wondering if you had an opportunity to talk about Middle East politics over there, specifically about Israel and how they feel about Israel.
Well, I mean, so as I was saying, Azerbaijan has a very strong relationship with Israel because Israel buys 60% of its oil from Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan imports a lot of technology and weaponry from Israel. So they're very positive towards Israelis for the most part. There is a certain sense amongst some people in Azerbaijan of solidarity with Muslim brethren, and so they take the side of being more supportive or in favor of the Palestinian cause. But for the most part, I try to avoid politics because they have their own conflict, which I don't know a whole lot about. I'm learning about it, but it's a pretty complicated story as far as I can tell. And like I said, they don't have freedom of press or freedom of speech or anything like that. So I try to avoid getting into political conversations because I know that certain things that I say or that they say could get us in trouble. So I say to the people in my group, people want to talk about politics, they can bring it up, allow them to bring it up, but avoid it as instigating it. But it was interesting, on the tour of Baku itself in the group, I was recommended this guy. He's a young guy, and he had just come off the front lines with Azerbaijan, with Armenia, and he totally denied the Armenian genocide. He said, well, they don't have pictures and video, and we do have pictures and video of their genocide of us.
Oh.
So, so yeah, it's a complicated dynamic, for sure. But yeah, generally they have a very positive relationship politically with Israel. Israel has actually bought access to an Air Force base because of its proximity to Iran. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find mezuzahs on the doorpost?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people still have mezuzahs. Yeah.
Just curious, so after the Soviets left, how did the dictatorship occur? Do you know the?
Yeah, so there was this family that was a part of one of they were part of the party, the Soviet party.
Soviet party.
Yeah, and then they were already well positioned, and then they were able to use the rhetoric building off of the inspiration of the vision of the Azerbaijani Republic, which was in 1917, 1918. They built off of that rhetoric and said, we're going to reestablish the Azerbaijani Republic, that dream. And so that was Haydar Aliyev. So Haydar is actually another Arabic word, and it means the same as my name does. So everywhere I go in the world, in the Middle East, I have this funny thing with my name. That I say my name's Arieh, and it's, what's that? And I say, if they're an Arabic speaker, Assad,
Oh, that's funny.
or Osama, or Haydar. I recently learned a really good one, which is Laith, which I really like, but for lion in Arabic. But so yeah, so this has been the ruling family, the Aliyev family ever since. Yeah, since 1991. Yeah.
Well, that's the way the other Central Asian republics did it too.
Yeah.
That's where those dictatorships came from too.
Right. It's funny, I talk with my friends who, my friends there who are part of the hiking, who run the hiking company, they're very worldly, they're very educated, and they're very open-minded. And yet my friend, he's an eco-activist, really passionate about these issues, and he's very, very clear. The people of Azerbaijan couldn't survive without a strong man in power. He wishes that there were more freedoms politically, but he believes that they have to have somebody with that kind of strong.
So he
Yeah.
came up with that rhetoric,
Yeah,
is that right?
I guess I don't know.
It's very similar to the way Argentina is. They feel, the Argentinians that I spend time with would say, well,